The cameras were rolling, the flowers were set, and the smiles were plastered on like nothing could go wrong. But behind those carefully rehearsed vows and photo-perfect moments, Lydia Plath's wedding spiraled into one of the most shocking scenes fans of Welcome to Plathville have ever witnessed. Rumors of a $560 million betrayal swirled through the headlines. Whispers of a secret divorce and even a new husband sent shockwaves across social media, and viewers were left questioning what was real, what was exaggerated, and what was deliberately hidden from the public eye. For a family that built its name on faith, obedience, and carefully guarded appearances, the truth coming apart at a wedding reception was more than gossip. It was a public undoing of years of silence. Hi, friends. I'm Sarah, and welcome to Sister Wives Chapter. Before we get too far in, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the twists, and let me know in the comments what you think about this entire situation. Did you see it coming, or did Lydia's wedding completely change the way you see the Plath family? From the outside, Lydia's story looked simple. A young woman deeply rooted in her faith, raised in a family where modesty and control were everyday rules, choosing to marry quickly and confidently. But under the surface, the family's attempts to step in, ask questions, and even hold a private conversation were shut down. The groom himself blocked access, making it clear that any resistance was going to be labeled as disrespect, not protection. That single moment at the wedding, when a family desperate for answers was pushed aside in the name of order, revealed something bigger than one disagreement. It showed how control wears the mask of care, how silence gets enforced as loyalty, and how quickly love can be weaponized when image matters more than honesty. And Lydia wasn't the only one caught in this. Moriah, her sister, has lived her own public battles. When she revealed her struggle with alopecia, it was not just a personal truth but a painful example of how this family's young women end up standing in front of the world, vulnerable, judged, and often unsupported. While Lydia held her composure, appearing calm and faithful in her submission to the path laid out before her, Moriah chose the opposite. Honesty over image, exposure over silence. Those two choices stand as mirror reflections of what every daughter in this family faces. Do you bend and play the part, or do you take the risk of breaking free? What happened at Lydia's wedding wasn't an isolated event. It was the eruption of years of suppressed voices, control disguised as spiritual guidance, and a culture where saying no is treated like betrayal. The Plath parents, Kim and Barry, spent years promoting discipline and structure. But when the children grew older, cracks appeared. Ethan struggled with independence in his marriage to Olivia. Micah broke away to chase modeling. Moriah chased music and individuality. And now Lydia, once the most loyal and obedient, walked straight into a marriage that alarmed her siblings, but left them powerless to intervene. This is the story of how one wedding exposed the ongoing fracture of the Plath family, how loyalty was demanded instead of earned, and how silence became more dangerous than the truth. And it isn't about whether Lydia loves her husband, or whether the family should have objected harder. It's about how years of control left them unable to talk, unable to trust, and unable to show up for each other without the fear of being shut out. And here's the part that will keep you watching. The meltdown at Lydia's wedding was only the beginning. The chaos around the $560 million betrayal rumor, the whispers of divorce, and the tug-of-war between loyalty and freedom aren't random scandals. They're the natural outcome of a family that has spent years choosing image over honesty, rules over connection, and silence over conversation. What you're about to hear isn't only about a wedding gone wrong. It's about how a family collapses when control becomes more important than care. Control was never a suggestion in the Plath family. From the moment Welcome to Plathville first hit screens, viewers could see the invisible fences that defined their lives. Kim and Barry Plath raised their 9 children with strict boundaries, shaped by a conservative faith that cut them off from mainstream culture. No television, no sugar, no movies. Friends were filtered, clothing was controlled, Even music was restricted. For the Plath children, obedience wasn't just expected, it was survival. Any voice that dared to question the rules was either ignored, silenced, or framed as rebellion. Kim and Barry's approach was all about keeping the outside world from corrupting their family. They said they wanted to raise their kids in a bubble, safe from harmful influences. But that bubble came at a cost. Silence became the standard. Struggles were hidden, doubts were swallowed, and appearances were guarded at all times. It didn't matter what was happening behind closed doors. The family was expected to present a united, faithful front. On camera, Kim often spoke with confidence about her choices, positioning her family as stronger and purer because they lived differently. But that confidence was also a wall. The message was clear. Questioning the system meant questioning God, and questioning God was betrayal. Barry, quieter and more reserved, played the role of enforcer in his own way. His soft-spoken demeanor hid the reality that he often let Kim's rules and authority stand unchecked. For the children, there was no room to argue. They had to obey, even when the obedience cost them their voice. It was no surprise, then, that the cracks in the family first came from the older kids. Moriah, always more outspoken and artistic, struggled under her mother's rules. Her love for music and self-expression didn't fit the mold of quiet modesty. The more Kim tried to restrict her, the more Moriah pushed back. Fans remember those painful scenes of Moriah in tears, trying to explain that she wanted independence, while Kim insisted she was going down the wrong path. Those moments revealed the tension at the heart of the family, loyalty versus individuality. Then came Ethan, the eldest son, whose marriage to Olivia brought the clash between family rules and adult independence into sharp focus. Olivia had grown up in a similarly strict environment, but she was determined to live differently. She encouraged Ethan to think for himself, to explore the world beyond his parents' control. Kim and Barry resisted fiercely, framing Olivia as a threat, the outsider who was pulling their son away. For viewers, the emotional strain was clear. Ethan was torn between the wife he loved and the parents he couldn't bear to disappoint. His silence and avoidance mirrored the culture he was raised in. Better to say nothing than to spark a fight. Micah, too, eventually broke free. He left home to pursue modeling, stepping into a lifestyle that clashed directly with the conservative values he was raised under. His independence wasn't as explosive as Moriah's rebellion, or as painful as Ethan's marital struggles, but it was a statement all the same. Micah chose to define his own life, even if it meant leaving behind the family structure that once defined him. Amid all these breakaways, Lydia remained the daughter who never questioned. Soft-spoken, faithful and devoted, she was the one who carried her Bible everywhere, the one who held on to prayer as her daily anchor, the one who stayed loyal even when others walked away. To Kim and Barry, Lydia was the confirmation that their parenting worked. While her siblings explored the wider world, Lydia stayed within the lines, comforting her parents and reinforcing their choices. But loyalty often came with a price. Lydia's obedience wasn't only about faith, it was about expectation. She was the daughter who didn't rock the boat, who gave her parents stability when everything else was falling apart. On the surface, that loyalty looked admirable. Underneath, it revealed how silence and control had shaped her entire identity. Speaking up wasn't an option. Questioning wasn't allowed. Submission was the only path forward. When the family fractured more publicly, with Olivia and Ethan moving away, Moriah struggling openly with her parents, and Micah building his own life, Lydia's role became even clearer. She wasn't just the obedient daughter. She was the symbol of the family's image. Her calm, composed presence reassured Kim and Barry that not all was lost. And yet, for her siblings, it raised alarm bells. They worried that Lydia's loyalty blinded her to the red flags they had already lived through. This is where the silence became dangerous. The family's history of avoiding conflict meant that even when concerns arose, they struggled to address them openly. The same pattern that had defined their upbringing, loyalty over honesty, silence over confrontation, played out again in Lydia's wedding journey. Her siblings wanted to protect her, to share their worries, but every attempt to break through was seen as disrespect. The culture of silence was stronger than their bond. As viewers, watching Lydia step into marriage with such quiet certainty was both moving and troubling. Her faith and trust seemed unshakable, but that unshakable calm looked eerily similar to submission without choice. Was she marrying out of love or out of expectation? Was her composure faith, or was it fear of rocking the boat? These were the questions fans couldn't stop asking. What made this all the more powerful was how Lydia's path contrasted with her siblings. Moriah spoke up. Ethan wrestled with his parents' control. Micah walked away. But Lydia stayed. And by staying, she carried the weight of the family's rules, silence, and expectations into her own adult life. And here's where things take a turn. Because the silence that defined Lydia's loyalty collided head-on with the family's concerns at the rehearsal dinner. That's when years of hidden struggles boiled to the surface, and the moment that was supposed to unite them instead pushed them even further apart. From the very beginning of Welcome to Plathville, the Plath family crafted an image that was clean, controlled, and rooted in faith. To the public eye, they appeared as a wholesome unit living apart from mainstream culture, protected from worldly influences by Kim and Barry's rules. That image was central to their identity. The children were modestly dressed, polite, and obedient. The parents spoke confidently about their decision to keep the world out. And for years, that image was carefully polished for outsiders to see. But the longer the cameras rolled, the clearer it became that the truth behind the scenes was far messier, far more painful and impossible to hide forever. The cracks were always there, hidden beneath rehearsed smiles. When Moriah struggled with independence, it was framed as teenage rebellion instead of a genuine cry for freedom. When Ethan wrestled with his parents' disapproval of Olivia, the conflict was shown as marital strain rather than the crushing weight of being forced to choose between wife and family. Even Micah's choice to leave and build a modeling career was framed as a simple lifestyle difference, instead of the result of years of strict rules and sheltered living. Over and over, the family defaulted to image management instead of honesty. Problems weren't faced directly. They were explained away, minimized, or brushed under the rug. And Lydia, more than anyone else, carried the responsibility of holding up that image. She embodied loyalty, faith, and quiet obedience. She prayed constantly, spoke softly, and gave every impression of peace. To Kim and Barry, Lydia's calm submission was proof that their parenting worked. Even as her siblings pushed back, she stayed. Even as her family fractured, she carried the torch of obedience. But to her siblings and to many viewers, that very submission looked like a warning sign. Was Lydia being shielded, or was she being silenced? Was she genuinely calm, or was she performing the role she had always been taught to play? This is where the contrast with Moriah became so striking. Moriah refused to keep everything polished. She chose vulnerability, even when it cost her. Her decision to open up about her battle with alopecia wasn't only about her personal health, it was a statement that she would not keep hiding. By showing her struggle to the world, she stripped away the polished image her family so often relied on. Vulnerability became her act of defiance, and in doing so, she exposed the pressure cooker environment that shaped them all. Lydia and Mariah, two sisters, raised under the same roof but responding in opposite ways, became symbols of the divide. Lydia clung to silence, performing the role of the good daughter, loyal and unshaken. Moriah risked judgment by bearing her pain publicly. Together, their paths revealed the impossible choice placed on the Plath children: conform and stay silent, or speak up and risk being seen as the problem. Adding to this pressure was the ever-present reality TV lens. The cameras amplified everything. Family dinners, arguments, emotional breakdowns. Nothing stayed private once the show aired. What might have been a quiet disagreement behind closed doors became a storyline for millions of viewers to dissect. The children weren't simply living their lives, they were living characters in a show. And in that dynamic, roles formed. Lydia, the faithful one. Moriah, the rebellious one. Ethan, the conflicted son. Olivia, the outsider. Micah, the independent dreamer. Once those roles solidified, breaking free became nearly impossible. For Lydia, the cameras became both a shield and a cage. Her quiet loyalty was amplified as a virtue, reinforcing her parents' image. But it also prevented her from expressing doubt. To show hesitation on camera would mean letting the polished image crack, and that wasn't something she was raised to do. Even at her own wedding, when her siblings tried to express concern, the priority wasn't honest conversation. The priority was control, order, and appearances. The groom's refusal to allow a private family discussion wasn't just about that moment. It was an extension of the family's long history of silencing. Discomfort for the sake of the image. The cost of that silence was enormous. For Moriah, it meant emotional isolation and exhaustion from constantly being misunderstood. For Ethan, it meant years of bottled-up resentment and confusion, unable to reconcile loyalty to his parents with his marriage. For Micah, it meant leaving entirely to breathe freely. And for Lydia, it meant carrying the unbearable weight of being the last symbol of loyalty, even when it left her siblings worried sick about her future. Time and again, viewers saw moments where attempts to protect Lydia were shut down. Her siblings wanted to ask questions, to slow things down, to make sure she wasn't walking into something blindly. But every effort was reframed as disrespect. Control disguised itself as care. Silence was equated with faith. And the result was a family too exhausted to keep trying. The image was preserved, but the truth was lost. That choice, to prioritize appearance over honesty, has left scars that will outlast the cameras. Because when loyalty comes before truth, family members stop confiding in each other. When silence is rewarded, problems fester. And when image becomes more important than care, the very foundation of trust begins to crumble. And here's the question that lingers after everything we've seen. With this much pressure, with this much silence, and with a marriage born inside a culture that values appearances over truth, how long can Lydia's marriage actually survive? Faith, loyalty, and betrayal. Faith has always been the Plath family's fortress and their prison. To understand Lydia's choices and the chaos surrounding her marriage, you have to step inside that fortress. In this world, obedience isn't just encouraged, it is demanded. Loyalty isn't optional, it is framed as sacred. And questioning the plan, whether that plan came from a parent, a pastor, or a future husband, was never just doubt, it was betrayal. Faith as the framework for Lydia, faith has always been her compass. From childhood, her identity was shaped around serving, yielding, and trusting authority. She was the daughter who prayed, the daughter who obeyed, the daughter who never made trouble. Where Moriah's defiance sparked tension and Ethan's independence brought open conflict, Lydia remained the steady flame, gentle, consistent, and submissive. To Lydia, marriage wasn't just a romantic partnership. It was a covenant written into her destiny by God Himself. So when her groom entered the picture and pushed for rapid commitment, Lydia didn't see red flags. She saw divine timing. She didn't question his urgency or his refusal to allow private conversations with her family. To her, those were not acts of control, but signs of spiritual certainty. This was God's plan, and Lydia believed it with her whole being. Dissent as betrayal, but to her siblings, that blind obedience felt like a betrayal. For years, they had tried to protect her, shielding her from the darker realities of their family's fractures, whispering warnings, and stepping into battles she was too gentle to fight. Moriah, in particular, carried the scars of dissent. Every time she raised her voice, Whether about her alopecia, her independence, or her heartbreaks, she was labeled the difficult one. She had lived in the role of betrayer, the daughter who wouldn't fall in line. So when she saw Lydia following the exact path she had once rejected, surrendering voice for loyalty, Moriah's frustration exploded. To Moriah, silence wasn't faith. It was surrender. Lydia's refusal to speak up, even at the rehearsal dinner when tensions were boiling over, was the ultimate betrayal. It wasn't just that she was marrying too quickly. It was that she was abandoning her siblings' attempts to keep her safe, choosing image over truth, loyalty over honesty. And in that moment, the family fracture deepened. Faith that was meant to unite them became the very wedge driving them apart. Barry's passivity and Kim's absence. At the center of it all was the void left by their parents. Barry, the patriarch, was present physically but absent emotionally. His passivity had always defined him. He avoided confrontation, smiled through tension, and preferred silence over intervention. That silence trickled down to the children. When Moriah cried out for help, when Ethan begged for space, when Lydia needed guidance, Barry stayed quiet. His inaction became its own form of control, a suffocating passivity that left the children to interpret faith and family in isolation. Kim, meanwhile, was absent in a different way. Her sharp authority had once been the family's backbone, but after her separation from Barry, her presence dissolved. Without her, there was no strong parent figure to balance Barry's quiet detachment. The children were left navigating faith, loyalty, and betrayal with no steady anchor. It's no wonder they splintered. Ethan clung to Olivia, battling his parents from a distance. Moriah rebelled, searching for freedom in vulnerability and art. Micah pursued independence, carving out his identity apart from family control. And Lydia, ever obedient, ever faithful, clung to the familiar framework of faith and loyalty, even if it meant silencing her own doubts. The parallel of Ethan and Lydia, the tragedy is that Lydia's story isn't new. It mirrors Ethan's, though the details are different. Ethan, too, rushed into marriage believing it was God's plan. He, too, faced loyalty tests that fractured his relationship with his family. And just like Lydia, Ethan's obedience to that plan left him caught between two worlds, his wife and his family of origin, both demanding loyalty, both treating dissent as betrayal. Where Ethan grew hardened and resentful, Lydia softened and submitted. But the cycle was the same. Obedience leading to fracture, loyalty creating distance, silence breeding pain. And now, the stakes are even higher. Because this isn't just about one wedding. This isn't just about Lydia's gentle faith clashing with Moriah's fiery dissent. There are whispers. Whispers that cut deeper than any argument at a rehearsal dinner. Whispers of betrayal not just spiritual but financial. Whispers that tie Lydia's marriage to something far darker than simple obedience. Retention booster line. What if Lydia's loyalty wasn't just about love or faith, but about money? And what if that $560 million betrayal rumor was the family's most dangerous secret yet? The slow erosion of trust, it's easy to point to one moment and call it the breaking point. The rehearsal dinner meltdown. The groom's shocking refusal to let Lydia have a private conversation. Moriah's fiery eruption. But the truth is, families don't collapse in one night. They erode, grain by grain, moment by moment, silence by silence. The Plaths didn't shatter because of one explosive argument. They splintered because of years of being told to keep quiet. Years of burying hurt. Years of choosing image over honesty. Silencing as survival from the beginning, silence was the family's survival strategy. If you felt doubt, you prayed it away. If you felt anger, you swallowed it. If you felt betrayal, you masked it with a smile. In a world where faith was supposed to answer every question, admitting pain felt like admitting weakness. Lydia mastered this silence. Her identity was woven into it. She learned that being the good daughter meant absorbing disappointment without complaint. showing up with a smile even when her heart was breaking, and shielding the family's image at all costs. But silence isn't neutral. It doesn't just erase conflict. It corrodes trust. Every time Lydia stayed quiet, her siblings felt abandoned. Every time she smiled through tension, they saw complicity. Slowly, the gap between them widened. The exhaustion of intervention for siblings like Moriah, the weight of intervention became unbearable. She tried to speak the truth. She tried to drag secrets into the light. She told the cameras about her alopecia, about her heartbreaks, about her struggles, and not because she wanted sympathy, but because she refused to keep living under the family's silent pact. And yet every time she tried to intervene for Lydia, she hit a wall. Lydia wouldn't push back. Lydia wouldn't fight. Lydia believed that faith demanded submission. To Moriah, it felt like screaming into a void. Ethan felt the same. His own marriage had become a battleground because of his family's silence. He knew what it meant to lose trust brick by brick, to see love dissolve because no one would speak honestly. Watching Lydia follow the same path was devastating. But whenever he tried to step in, Lydia resisted. She was loyal to her groom, loyal to God's plan, loyal to the script she'd been handed since childhood. It left the siblings exhausted. You can only bang your fists against a locked door for so long before your knuckles bleed. At some point, intervention starts to feel like betrayal, and silence starts to look easier. Moriah versus Lydia. Truth versus image. This is where the deepest fracture lies. Moriah and Lydia represent two paths carved by the same upbringing. Moriah, the truth teller. She exposed her vulnerability, made her private pain public, and rejected the glossy facade. Her choice came with consequences. She was branded rebellious, dramatic, difficult. But she held her dignity because she refused to lie. Lydia, the image keeper. She embodied loyalty, submission, the polished smile that soothed outsiders and reassured the faithful. Her choice, too, had consequences. She avoided conflict, but she lost her siblings' trust. She gained loyalty from authority figures, but she forfeited the raw connection that comes only from honesty. Both women are products of the same system. One burned under the weight of silence and clawed her way free. The other made peace with it, even if it meant sacrificing her agency. And in their tension, you can see the larger family collapse written plainly. When one child screams the truth and another buries it, the middle ground becomes uninhabitable. The larger warning. This story isn't just about one family. It's about the slow erosion of trust that happens when silence becomes the law. The danger isn't the big outburst. The danger isn't the rehearsal dinner, the screaming match, or the cameras catching every raw word. Those moments are loud, visible, dramatic. They shock, but they don't destroy. The real danger is what happens in the quiet. When siblings stop confiding in each other because they know their words will be met with silence. When children stop asking parents for help because they know the answer will be passivity. When faith becomes a shield not for hope but for avoidance. That is the slow erosion of trust. The kind of erosion that doesn't make headlines but leaves permanent cracks. And by the time the explosion happens, by the time a groom bans private conversations or a sister storms out of a rehearsal dinner, the foundation is already gone. The Plaths are living proof of what happens when image becomes more important than truth, when silence masquerades as loyalty, and when obedience is mistaken for love. And maybe that's the real warning here, not just for Lydia, not just for the Plaths, but for all of us. Because every family, every relationship, every community faces the same temptation, to avoid conflict by silencing it, to protect the image instead of the truth, to choose comfort over honesty. Retention booster line. So as we move into the final chapter, ask yourself, what does this slow erosion of trust reveal, not just about the Plaths, but about us? And what emotional reckoning still waits at the end of this story? Conclusion. When silence finally breaks, control has always been the Plath family's shadow. From the outside, it looked like protection, rules to keep the children safe, faith to guide their paths, boundaries to guard against the world. But step closer and that protection looks different. It begins to feel less like safety and more like surveillance. Less like care and more like control. Faith, too, was never just faith. It was the language that sanctified silence. To speak against a parent, a pastor, or a groom wasn't just to question authority. It was to question God's plan. That is how silence grew roots in this family. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, and Lydia became its most faithful guardian. She kept her struggles hidden, smiled when she was expected to, and held fast to the belief that obedience would bring peace. Her wedding didn't simply mark the start of a marriage. It became a stage where years of silence, loyalty, and suppressed conflict finally collided. Personal and symbolic. What makes Lydia's story so powerful and so tragic is that it is both deeply personal and painfully symbolic. Personally, it's about a gentle daughter swept into a marriage under the weight of expectation. About siblings who fought to intervene but were shut out at the door. About a rehearsal dinner where silence finally cracked but never fully shattered. Symbolically, it's about the family itself. The way obedience and secrecy shaped every child differently. Ethan into resistance, Moriah into vulnerability, Micah into independence, and Lydia into compliance. It's about how silence doesn't keep peace. It destroys it slowly, invisibly, until the trust that once held a family together is gone. The mirror held to us. But Lydia's story is not just the Plaths' story. It's a mirror. It forces us to ask what happens in our own families, our own communities, when image takes precedence over truth. When faith is used to silence instead of strengthen. When love is confused with loyalty, and loyalty becomes a weapon. Maybe that's why this story resonates so deeply. Because we know what it feels like to stay quiet when we should speak. We know the exhaustion of trying to protect someone who won't protect themselves. We know the weight of secrets carried too long, call to action, and now I want to hear from you. Do you see Lydia's silence as faith or as surrender? Was Moriah right to blow open the truth, or did her honesty create new wounds? And what about the whispers of betrayal that linger over this marriage? Do you believe the story is finished, or is it only beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading every single one. And if you want to keep unpacking the drama, the fractures, and the truths hidden beneath reality TV's polished surface, don't forget to subscribe to Sister Wives Chapter. This story doesn't end here, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The final suspense, because at the heart of it all lies one question. Families can survive conflict. They can even survive betrayal. But can they survive silence? What happens when silence finally breaks?